So let's just dive in with Professor Biju, and over to you.
Thanks, Prabita, for the introduction, and I'm also thankful to the organizers for the opportunity outside in. Okay, from outside we are actually going in, and then we are going to dive into the oceans, and then let us see. You can travel with me, and as the topic reveals, this is a very very vast subject. I can only give you a glimpse of the ocean and the life in the ocean, and let us begin this journey with. Uh, when we talk about oceans, particularly when we discuss with oceans, right from the school classes we hear this question. And this is the first Nobel Prize which came to India for an work done exclusively in India, and thanks to Sir CV Raman. And this question is actually the topic of PhD research even now in many parts of the world. So that interest, that kindled by Professor CV Raman is continuing unabated. And let me, begin the discussion about the importance of the ocean and what do we know about the ocean. Let me begin with this short video. Well, with this, the introduction of the short documentary produced by the Conservation International, which explains, the role of oceans. The first discussion about the place, the planet. It is not Earth; it's basically water. It's a watery planet, and it has only one ocean. We have different ocean basins, but Earth has only one ocean that covers more than 70% of the surface of the Earth. And if you look by the volume or biomass, 99% of the living space on the planet is in the ocean. And also, Earth's highest peak, deepest valleys, flattest plains, everything is in the ocean. And suppose you believe that Earth is flat, not round, then you can expect around 3.7 kilometer of water. So that's the amount of water which the Earth hold in the oceans. And 98, which is 98% of the Earth's water, and 90% of the total biomass of the Earth is in the oceans. And if you are living in some part of landlocked areas in India, yet you are the coastal population, primarily because 60 kilometers from the coast is considered as the coastal belt, and then 40% of the world population lives in that area, which is a tiny fraction of the planet's surface. So that means highly populated this area is. And at present, the documented biodiversity of the ocean is around 200,000. But this is, I'm sure, a highly underestimated calculation, and we don't know how many are there. And right from the smallest to the largest animal in the planet lives in the ocean. And the smallest may be around 8 mm, and still smaller are there, which are actually the males of deep sea fishes, which remain as a parasite on the body of the female. So that's still smaller. And what diversity can we expect? And there's an interesting study which is done by the Census of Marine Life, where 1 liter of seawater from the tropical belt is taken up, and they have done the metagenomic analysis to find out the diversity of DNA in that 1 liter of seawater from the tropical belt. They could identify 35,000 species of bacteria, which is an estimate of the projected diversity of the life in the ocean. So that may be the diversity. And also, even I told you there is only one ocean, and throughout the ocean, the water remain connected, interconnected, and in is the whole water is circulated throughout the world or throughout the planet with the help of wind, the tides, and force of the Earth's rotation, and that actually keep the Earth's climate regulated. So that's the role. And also, it is the highest the body of water accumulates heat. So the heat budget of the planet is actually maintained by the oceans, and that is 1%. And also, if you look at the carbon dioxide, 30% of the carbon dioxide produced by the humans, they are actually absorbed and handled by the oceans. And also, you remember, there is a general feeling that the air we breathe primarily comes from the tropical rainforest. It is not true. And the major part of the oxygen which we breathe actually come from the minute plants called the phytoplanktons that float on the surface of the water. And they regulate the climate primarily because the oceans are the largest carbon sinks in the world. And many of the minerals, and they also play a very important role in biogeochemical cycles, and including nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and carbon. And then and also the ocean is connected to the lakes. And what is the connection between a river in the Western Ghats and the ocean nearby and the Arabian Sea? And the answer is very simple: they remain interconnected, and which we seldom study in ecology, the connectivity between the lakes, the rivers, and the ocean. And for example, if you have the Western Ghats on one side, and it's a water vapor which emanates from the sea, it is stopped by the Western Ghats, and we receive this part of the Kerala and Karnataka plenty of rain. And on the other part, there is a rain shadow area in Tamil Nadu, Deccan Plateau, which receive little amount of rain. So you can see that there is interconnection. The rivers in the Western Ghats primarily originates in the nearby sea in the form of water vapor, and it comes down and then it flows as a water and finally merges with the ocean. So there's a larger circle of connectivity, the connectivity of life, the connectivity of energy, and the connectivity of the biological systems there. So you can see that that is continuously happening, and this kind of connectivity is, which is the connectivity is often ignored by the policymakers, even by the scientific community, and that connectivity plays a very, very important role in maintaining the systems in proper health. And you come to the livelihood of the people. More than 3 billion people depend upon the coastal diversity, biodiversity for their livelihoods. Maybe the fishermen or the people, stakeholders connected with that fishery sector, everybody make 3 billion people make their living out of the resources from this sea. And there is a recent estimation of the amount of money or the market value of the marine and coastal resources. And there are interesting studies right from the study of which is published in Nature a decade back, and this is a recent estimate which clearly shows that the market value of the marine and coastal resources and the industries is estimated to be around 3 trillion per year US dollar, and which is almost 5% of the global GDP. And also you remember that this, compared to any other ecosystem in the planet, ocean is the least explored. And the studies reveal that only 15% of the ocean is explored fully in terms of biodiversity documentation. Okay, but there is a general feeling that ocean is large and it's finite, and but if you look at the resources, and it's always not infinite, but it is finite. And primarily because the oceans, they are, they if you look at the planetary perspective, the ocean is a thin layer of water on the surface. It is thinner, if you consider, it's thinner than the skin of an apple, and therefore inherently fragile and finite. And that's the reason why we need to care about the oceans and its resources, because it's finite. And then if you look at the Indian scenario, how much is the resources the government receive every year through the export of marine products? And last year, the export value of the materials, the oceanic resources exported from India. I'm speaking only about the living resources. Remember, it's around almost 46,000 crores a year. That this is the amount of money that is received by the government through the export of marine fishery products. And we have, as Indians, we should know our heritage as well. We have a long history of ocean exploration, and the recent studies, with evidences, project that the people of Indus Valley civilization have used monsoon wind and currents for maritime trade and navigation way back in 2500 BC. And that means we have a very long history of maritime exploration. And I'm not going into the details of that, but if you look at the ancient literature available in South India, which clearly shows the connectivity between the people and the landscapes and the ecosystems. And in South India, especially in southern part of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, the land was classified as 5 important regions, right from the Kurinji region, which is the mountainous region. Then we have the Mullai region, which is the forest. And then we have the Marutam, which is the cropland. And then we have the Palai region, which is the desert. And then we have the Nathal region, which is the seashore. So you can see the way in which the people who have actually innate connectivity with the ecosystems, and they have made a very good classification of the ecosystem based on the physiographic feature. And then there are also interesting observations. For example, the coastal population in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, they are including some part of Karnataka, were called Meenavar. Meen is something a name for a fish in Malayalam and Tamil, and it's also called Paravar in Sangam literature. So the people are connected with the fish or their occupation. And also there are the people who are actually fishing, the going for fishing, or the fishermen population are also called the Marakas, which are who used to use the maram. Maram means the vessel used for the fishing. And also the people in India, particularly the fishing population in India, they used to document the diversity. They used to document the fish shoals based on sight, sound, and smell, etc. So that is the largest tradition. And look at the future of the ocean and what resources it offer. And there are 5 sectors where the resources can be used for developing the future economy. And these are the 5 areas where you can see it start with aquaculture, because in land area, land-based the agricultural activity is going to be affected primarily because of the limitation in the availability of land, agricultural field, etc. So there's going to be a thrust on aquaculture. Primarily, we have not actually started doing the seaweed farming, and that's called the seaweed aquaculture. A lot of scope. Only in Tamil Nadu, some part of Tamil Nadu, it is there in an active form, but nowhere else in India we are yet to explore the possibility of the seaweed farming. which is one of the most important vegetables available for future. Okay, and also fish. And second is the coastal and maritime tourism. And you look and search Google and find out what are the the highly paid hotels and restaurants across the world, and many of them, the top ranking, they are on the coral islands in the ocean. And so we have larger possibility of expanding coastal tourism and maritime tourism. And then there is something called the blue biotechnology, where we depend upon the ocean resources for promoting biotechnology. And even at present, many of the life-saving drugs actually come from the oceans, and there are plenty in the list, in the pipeline as well. Then renewable energy. Most part of the world, the energy is primarily trapped from the oceanic resources, as well as from the coastal region. And the tidal, it is the tidal farms, the wind farms, everything will be, and the geothermal energy. All these things can be better utilized from the oceans. And in countries like China, Germany, etc., major part of that wind turbines are in the coastal waters, not in the coastal plain, but in the coastal waters. And ultimately, it is one of the largest source for minerals. And on the land, we have almost exhausted major part of the minerals, and we have to look at the ocean, particularly the deep sea, for the extraction of minerals. So if you look at the ocean, it provides us a lot of scope for economic development. And that is that kind of a growth centered on ocean is called blue growth, and the economy which is strengthened by the oceanic resources are basically the blue economy. So we expect that in short, there will be more jobs, there will be more opportunities from the oceans. So it is actually a treasure house for future, treasure house of resources for future, provided we have to value it properly, and the sustainability should be addressed. Okay, the sustainability of resources is addressed properly. And if you look at the life in the ocean, this is probably the largest study, done by the human species to document the biodiversity of the ocean. And that study, that project is called the Census of Marine Life, or COML, which was completed in 2010, but yet the results are not fully out, because the scientists from different parts of the world still, mine the data and come up with the new species, etc., etc. It, as part of the project, there were more than 540 expeditions, and more than 2,700 scientists from different parts of the world, including in 80 nations. They were part of the study, and almost all the the information is now available in the ocean information system, and in the form of digital archives. And then there were 30 million observations. And in few years time, they have discovered more than 20,000 new species of organism from the ocean. So this is again an indication towards the way in which the future exploration of life on the ocean continue. And if you look at the uh, a
Earth is a
short
living
video on
organism.
that,
Not
the
only are
census
the
of marine
oceans a
life.
fundamental element of our ecosystem, but the majority of life on Earth swims, crawls, eats, fights, and lives in our seas. What are the consequences of knowing so little about the biodiversity of life in the oceans and its ties to the health of the planet? All nations are affected by overfishing, the breakdown of international fisheries, pollution, and the destruction of coastal habitats. Shifts in ocean temperatures affect where a species decides to live and travel. Warmer surfaces also limit the distribution of essential nutrients. Meanwhile, plankton populations, the base of the oceanic food web, are constantly shifting in size and location as ocean conditions change. In fact, our seas hold innumerable mysterious species that react to and impact the environment in which they live. These are but a few examples of the complex underwater world. As the system transforms, how is every other species in the food web impacted, including humans? Recently, scientists from over 80 nations, working under the Census of Marine Life, have been deploying new technologies that monitor and measure life within an emerging global ocean observing system. New advances in acoustic sensing allow us to track animals at a scale tens of thousands of times greater than previously possible. This aids in the mapping of fish stock distribution and the building of sustainable fisheries. The cataloging of short DNA sequences allows for the rapid and accurate identification of life, from microbes to fish. With this technique, authorities can detect endangered species being illegally sold in world markets, and researchers can better catalog and monitor the diversity of life in our seas. By fitting animals with tiny sensors and satellite links, we can study previously inaccessible areas of the oceans. For instance, as a bluefin tuna is detected, we can follow its travels from Florida to Italy. In the case of the Pacific salmon, we are better equipped to know where and why these fish die. These tags also collect ecosystem data from the animal's surroundings, such as light, depth, temperature, and salinity. Animals are proving to be remarkable oceanographers. The elephant seal dives up to 1.5 kilometers below the surface and spends 10 months of the year at sea. The white shark regularly travels 4,000 kilometers from California to Hawaii. By tagging a multitude of species, we can track their migratory routes and identify feeding and mating hotspots. Technologies such as these, being implemented in Earth and ocean observing systems, can help us monitor, track, and study the health of the oceans and the life within them. The findings from this research are being stored in the Ocean Biogeographic Information System, a gigantic global database available to people worldwide. These initiatives, conducted over the long term with international cooperation, will allow us to measure the impact of climate change on marine life, manage our fisheries, coastal ecosystems, and water pollution, detect harmful bacteria in our seas, and discover new pharmaceuticals to help save lives. We rely on the oceans for energy, weather, food, and recreation. We must invest in technologies that will allow us to understand the relationship between us and the rich ecosystem of which we are a part.
Well, this is an indication this how the technologies play an important role in future documentation of the marine life. And if you look at the photograph here, and all these things are the recent discoveries from the depth of the ocean, and that include a discovery of a fish from called Mariana snailfish from the depth of the Mariana Trench. That means even at that depth, an organism, a fully grown organism, a fish can survive. And all these, recent investigations are primarily with the help of new technology, which I will explain in the coming slides, which helped in documenting the diversity at the depth of the oceans. And probably these organisms will deliver a lot of biomolecules for future research as well. And thanks to technology, as you look at the technologies, particularly in the form of research vessels and remotely operated vehicles, and then the acoustic technology, and the DNA barcoding technology, everything will actually help us in documenting the life, detecting the life, and of course making use of them for the future of mankind. And also, right from the day in which human beings, with the help of technology, started diving into the ocean, and we used the initial apparatus called scuba. This is called self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. And now from that, we have now come to the stage of remotely operated vehicles, which can be operated at greater depth of the oceans. And then we have the underwater robots, which actually can video document as well as collect data, collect organism for scientific investigations. And all these technological innovations in the field of oceanography, ocean science, and it helps us in documenting life in a better manner in the future as well. So in India also, the scientific investigators started using these instruments, and I am sure that this is going to be the future of the exploring the unexplored areas of the oceans in future. And also, there is an area where little amount of research has taken place in India, and that's the behavior of larger or mega carnivores in the oceanic waters as well as coastal waters. So this is an area, this definitely need more money, more investment, and then definitely improved technologies for studying this. And also, if you look at the way in which the robots help, and this is again a video which will a short video which will provide you a glimpse of what is happening in the form of underwater research. And this person is quite known for the students as well as researchers. James Cameroon, who has been involved in a dive into the deepest spot on Earth, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. And this is the submarine machine he has developed to dive into the ocean. And we expect a film from him based on these journeys. And just to tell you, to show you how much is the depth in which a research, specially designed research vessel can travel. So it's a journey up to 35,000 feet down, 30,000 feet down, and then you reach the at 36,070 feet depth, you reach the Challenger Deep. So all these studies in the recent years provide you with a lot of information about the life which is not explored earlier, and and the organism with their very peculiar behavior, etc. And then in India also there are a lot of interesting scientific advancements happening with the help of the the Indian National Center for Ocean and Information Services, and with the help of the oceanic satellites, which we have put in the outer space, and we started documenting some of the climatic, the changes, and also the coastal ecosystem changes with the help of remote sensing technology, and that has started, and the information has started pouring in now. And then there is a general saying that we know little about the deep sea than about the moon. And this is true with regard to the deep sea, because deep sea, many of you work in with the DNA molecules, the PCR machine, and the enzymes, all the enzymes, they are actually now with you primarily thanks to some of the organisms which can tolerate very high temperature. And what about the deep sea organisms which can withstand very high temperature, very high pressure, and toxic situations, anoxic situations? They are the storehouse of very, very unique molecules. And this is an area which promises a lot of molecules for the pharmaceutical research, therapeutic applications, and of course the environmental management technologies. So this is an area which is still at its infancy as far as India is concerned, but a lot of scope for advancing research as well as come out with very, very interesting molecules. And technology can also help us. For example, what you see here in this slide is actually an investigation where we were part of that. This is about the humpback whale. And you look at this map. This is Oman. In Oman, this is there is a larger population in the coastal waters of humpback dolphin. What you see here in this photograph is a humpback dolphin. And humpback dolphin, they have actually the research team from the Arabian humpback whale network. They have tagged 24 the humpback whales in the coastal waters of Oman. One animal started moving from there, and they started coming to India. First they came to Goa, and then reached to Kerala, and then we were informed by Dipani, who is working on the marine mammals, and then we started we sought the help of the Coast Guard, and to find out their journey, and to try to locate these organisms. So with the help of the radio tags attached to the body of the animal, this animal, they named it, this female is they named it as Luban. Luban, the just like tigers, the whales can be identified by the peculiar markings on their tail fin. And they have the marking just like a tree, and hence they name it Luban. And that female started coming to Indian waters, and finally reached Tamil Nadu, stayed there for 15 days, 2 weeks, and then started moving up. And then this is an indication, but we don't know anything about the biology of humpback whales as in Indian waters. Why do they come here? What is the purpose? Whether it is for breeding or feeding, and what is their role of migration to Indian waters, etc., etc. Now we have the hydroacoustic instruments placed by some of the research institutions across the Indian waters, which will provide us more information about this animal. At least we can record their sound. This animal produces magnificent sound, and then we'll get a lot of information on that. So that's, and also India is a place where we have done little about documenting the behavior of organisms in many places. This animal is very interesting. This is a humpback dolphin, the Sousa plumbea, and we can study them right from the coastal, waiting in the coastal areas. We can even document their behavior and their, the interesting life strategies. And these are and quite a lot of things yet to be discovered. These are some of the discoveries which we made from our lab in the last few years, and plenty of organisms. Several groups are there which are totally unexplored in India. Some of the minor phyla, we don't have even taxonomic experts available in India. So a lot of scope for documenting them. And coming to the threats of the ocean, it's multifarious, and the overexploitation and fish-related subjects in ocean are actually the cover stories in leading magazines, research journals like Nature and Science, where more than once it appeared as a cover story, giving us a clue that this is globally, this is an important topic to discuss, the overexploitation of resources. And many of the studies clearly show that the predators are disappearing from the oceans, and because they are larger sized, they are carnivores, and they are on the top of the food chain, and they are disappearing in large numbers. And when they disappear, and there will be cascading impact in the oceans, and which is not properly documented, and there is an impact of climate change. All these things together ultimately contribute to the depletion of resources from different part of the ocean. So the predator loss of predators is one of the common features which you see in the oceans, disappearance of larger predators. And overexploitation for our own purposes is again another way in which we document. This is a video which is available from South India in Trivandrum yesterday, shot by some of the animal right organizations, the way in which cruelly the turtles are killed in India. And the overexploitation is another issue. And then as a result of exploitation, in order to curtail the way, the exploitation rate, many of the animals have now been included, marine animals have been included in the Wildlife Protection Act of India through a series of amendments starting from 2010. Many of the organisms now appear in the protected, the Schedule 1 and of the Wildlife Protection Act of India. And why these animals in the Wildlife Protection Act, we will discuss in the coming slides. And there is another issue of the marine debris, and particularly the plastic pollution in the ocean. And there are interesting studies, because ocean is they have a very peculiar the current pattern, and that itself actually carry or transport some of the organisms from one part of the ocean to the other part of the ocean. And there are interesting studies where the plastic materials are proved to be effective carriers of the invasive species. And the species from the American, the coastal area were transported to Japan through, carried in a plastic sheet or plastic debris molecules. And we recently documented one invasive species which which is now spreading throughout the Indian estuarine environment. The Mitella strigata, a bivalve mussel, which remain attached to the some objects, including the ship, and when they travel, they are carried to different parts of the world. So all these things, and plastic may also serve as a platform to transport these organisms, including pathogens, to different part of the oceans. And the plastic itself has its own issues like this. The ghost nets, the nylon nets, when they are actually damaged, they are thrown back into the ocean. They drift in the ocean and act as a wall of death. And this is called the ghost net. Ghost net is a very serious issue, including in India, because they are thrown back into the ocean and they kill a large number of organisms, particularly the marine mammals and birds are entangled here, and they die. And the latest issue is, of course, because of the wave action, the larger plastic marine debris in the form of plastic, the carry bags and other molecules, they are broken down into small particles, particularly those below 5 millimeter in size are called microplastics. And that itself is actually a topic of discussion for 1 hour, because the way in which the microplastics behave, the way in which the microplastics actually absorb the molecules on its surface, and the chemicals, how they pass into the food chain. All these things are actually, at the beginning point of research in India now, and this definitely causes a lot of issues. The thrown out molecules, which are basically coming from the land because of human activities. And there are sort of a lot of issues connected with the climate change and the ocean, and which include the change in the water, changes in the nutrient availability, changes in the water chemistry, more carbon dioxide in the air, and ultimately it's dissolved in water and form carbonic acid, and it changes the water chemistry, and more acidic waters across the world. This phenomenon is called acidification, a strong issue with regard to the animals like the mollusks with a calcium carbonate covering. And then it increases, the climate change increases storms and cyclones across the world, including in India, and the percentage is increasing year after year. And that also is another impact, and then direct impact on the organisms. For example, a typical case of oxygen minimum zones, and because of all these variations in the chemistry in the water, and the variations in the atmospheric chemistry, a lot of things are happening in the ocean, and there are a large number of oxygen minimum zones appearing in different parts of the Indian Oceans. One. And second is that sea surface temperature is increasing, and as a result there is change in the distribution pattern of organisms in the ocean. I take the example of the largest the percentage of marine fishery contribution by a single species called oil sardine in India. And last few years, India has recorded almost 35 to 40% reduction in the biomass of oil sardine. And the reason is that they are migrating. They are migrating northwards primarily because of these changes in the sea surface temperature, and other factors like El Nino, some in other part of the ocean, may also contribute to these changes. And that means the pattern, distribution pattern, the breeding cycle of all these organisms are now slowly impacted as a result of climate change. Again, another larger topic for discussion. And there are some unusual fishes started landing in large proportions, like the Odona snake or the triggerfish. And why their population is increasing in the water? Is it because of the change in the the food web structure, or the changes in the predator population? We have to explore for further. Then another important thing is change in the way in which the coastal areas are changing as a result of the shoreline changes. And large number of reasons are there. And this is a beach where I usually go right from 1980s till now. And you can see that this was a scenario when I started visiting this beach 20 years back. And now this is a scenario because of the sea level, the coastal erosion, and the entire area is protected by the granite wall. And the turtles, they need a gentle beach to come and lay eggs in the high tide, above the high tide line, and that is not happening in many of the areas. And there are large number of issues connected with the turtles, and there is an issue of coral ocean acidification, and all these changes, particularly the sea surface temperature variation, may ultimately impact the coral reefs. And coral reefs, as you are aware, they are the rainforest of the oceans. 40% of the fishes available in the ocean either breed there, or they are available, they make use of the habitats available in the coral reefs, despite the fact that the coral reefs represent only a small fraction of the ocean area, and that too is limited in the tropical belt. And what is happening in the coral reefs? The color which you see here in the coral reef is not because of the corals, but because of the algae which live inside the coral. They are called zooxanthellae. And in many of the Indian genera of these algae are now called Zimbodinium. And there is an interesting association between the algae and the corals. Okay, and when there is more, when the algae is, and so when the coral is under stress, or there's more temperature, and the algae may leave the coral, leaving the coral bleached. And many areas you will see like this, the corals remain bleached. And if that phenomena continues for some time, then the corals will die. And that is the reason why the coral reefs are supposed to be the ecosystem in danger compared to any other ecosystem in the planet. Because if the global warming phenomena continues, and that is going to be a disaster as far as corals are concerned. And there is also another complicated issue of ocean acidification, because the corals, the externally protected by the calcareous covering, and the acid water will ultimately destabilize their exoskeleton. All these things are complicated when you discuss about the climate change in the oceans. And ocean is a resource for a quite number of drugs. As you can see, the larger number of investigations in the world are centered around this organism called conus, or the cone shell. and which ultimately proved way for the discovery of one of the life-saving medicines, and that is highly, now used across the world as a painkiller in the place of morphine. And because these organisms are unprotected, and they have no other way to protect their predators, they produce strong chemicals, and these chemicals definitely may serve human being as antiviral, anti bacterial compounds, and a lot of things are in the pipeline. And probably the largest number of medicines, life-saving medicines in the market today now come from the oceans. And we have a larger project in many parts of the world called Drugs from the Ocean, which is now active. And also, these oceanic animals serve as an inspiration for the biomimetic people to design many of the objects, and ultimately design many of the novel compounds. And you look at these two organisms, and probably those who are watching National Geographic and other channels, you may observe these animals in movement. And this is shark, and this is the whale. Well, both are larger animals. And then look at the body. And if you look at the body of the blue whale or whales, you can see there are a large number of organisms remain attached on their body surface. That means they carry a lot of epiphytes and epibionts in their body. And that means it's the larger surface area provide a better place for the organism to attach. Look at this shark body, clean, free of many organisms except some sucker fish. You don't find any other organism clearly attached to the skin of these sharks. Why this change? And then this is an interesting question and to investigate. So these questions actually ultimately lead to some of the discoveries. And look at the close structure of the way in which the scales are arranged on the body of the shark. And they have a very peculiar skin, and the pattern in which the scales are arranged in the skin is very peculiar, which hold lesser number of microbes. So why not develop a molecule, a fabric, which actually with this kind of a design? And this is now designed by the scientific community and now used in many of the hospitals across the world, where they are used as an antiseptic material, and which hold a lesser amount of bacteria on its surface. And this organism, this is called the mussel, and they have a very small thread with which they attach their body on the rocks. And that means they have a glue in these fine threads called byssus threads, which enable them to attach on hard objects. Not only that, they can withstand very high pressure because they are present in the shallow water. They are exposed to the wave action, very strong wave action, but they never get separated from the attachment. So that means they have a glue with a very special, the chemical structure. And now the scientists have isolated this glue, and that with the chemical structure like this, and this is now produced artificially, and that is one of the strongest glue discovered by the human beings now. So these kind of investigations are very interesting. And then I earlier spoke about the humpback whale. Humpback whale alone has a very peculiar flipper. It's a huge body, and they are driven by the activity of this flipper, and it helps in changing the direction, propel the animal forward. Why this is happening? They have a very peculiar structure in the anterior part of the flipper. So now that structure is now copied and put in the wind turbine with the maximum efficiency of movement. And then another typical example of biomimetics. And what we need now for future is actually to get inspired from the ocean and give more opportunity to the younger generation to learn, know about the oceans. And that kind of an inspiration ultimately will help in understanding more about the ocean, and expand their knowledge further. And then finally, some of them may turn out to be better oceanographers for tomorrow. But we need some kind of a platform for providing them this information and providing them with this kind of inspiration, which happens with the nature camps happening in many of the forest areas across India. But that is not the case with ocean, because we don't have a standard oceanarium in India at present. And the oceanarium, a journey into the oceanarium, a journey into an aquarium may provide that kind of a bio-inspiration for many of the youngsters to take up this work and carry forward this kind of a journey. And it's an inspiration. It's the inspiration not only for the scientific community, it's inspiration for the people in arts, culture, etc. Quite a number of books that too that inspire including the latest edition of the Blue Planet 2, right from the book of the Costo, which is called The Silent World, which inspire us, and a series of publications by the Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, and before Silent Spring she wrote 2 books on oceans, and now a series of book by Sylvia. These people definitely inspire the youngsters and the adults from different parts of the world to look at the ocean, and to understand its potential role in the ocean, which drive the planet health. And also you look at you don't have to be inspired by the Western philosophy. The Indian philosophy also says that the earth actually remains on the surface of a turtle. Fine, get inspired, because if you do something with these animals, ultimately the planet will you lose the planet where you live. And also you need to be part of the action, where there this is a typical example of a Sova beach in Mumbai, where a single man's initiative ultimately helped in cleaning the beach, because beaches are all polluted, and where we need the involvement of the younger generation to be part of the solution, which we actually created for the ocean. And there are in some places, including in Chennai, where the animals are symbols of protection, particularly the marine turtles. And there is actually the Swim for the Turtle program, Run for the Turtle program, where the students are also, the younger generation is also involved in protecting these animals. And these kind of examples should come in different parts of India, so that the massive awareness about what is happening in the ocean will be there. And we also, as part of the awareness program in our department in University of Kerala, does the same, imparting this kind of a knowledge to the common man as well as to the younger generation. And this is also time to tell the others that this is ocean is the blood which is in your body is actually part of the ocean. That means you carry the ocean inside, and it's our duty to protect the ocean outside. An inside out program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Biju. Um, I think we can sort of expect some more questions to come in a minute. But maybe we can begin with the ones that I had shared with you that we got from someone earlier before the talk. There was a question about producing algal biofuel on the ocean floor. Will that be helpful in production of algae biofuel without harming any oceanic species?
Yeah, so that is possible. This kind of particularly the biofuel production from the oceanic organisms, particularly the algae, is now there in many of the laboratories. But only thing is that the limitation of the study is to go in a larger scale. And this larger scale, the experiments will require some more perfection with regard to the technology. And definitely, it is just like producing the fuel from many of the land-based plants like jatropha. Not much different, but you are working with a smaller molecules where you can cultivate in large numbers in a laboratory. But taking it to the laboratory scale level for catering the need of the people, that too with a limited amount of money involved, and that is a question. And there we need some kind of breaking in of technology, where we need to produce more energy from limited number of organisms, so limited volume. And that's a challenge, and I'm sure that in the future research that we can break that challenge as well in future. So but that will not kill any organisms, because we are collecting these organisms, cultivating in a laboratory scale, and then enhancing the production. So ultimately this will not involve in any killing of the marine organism per se. Okay.
Okay, great. So we have one more question that I think we'll save for the end. For now, Ambali asks, is there any regulation on how many fish fishermen can catch in the Indian coastal region?
Well, the conservation laws in fisheries are governed by a larger fishery policy, and we have the Marine Fishery Regulation Act. Okay, and this Regulation Act is followed by many of the states. Many of the states have their own Marine Fishery Regulation Act. And we have some kind of a control happening in India, and one is actually the input control, and there are few output controls also. For example, we have a closed season declared in many of the coastal states, where we have regulated the number of the fishing operation by the trawlers during a particular season. This is called closed season. But in many of the Western countries, closed season is closed for all the fishing vessels. But we have closed it for trawlers, which are the major contributors to fisheries in India. That is one kind of a control. And the second kind of a control is actually regulating the number of fishing vessels and the number of fishing days or quantity of fish, which is there in many part of the world, but not in India. I'm sure when you go for considering the level in which we are exploiting the resources, and considering the way in which the resources have almost the fact that the resources have almost reached a plateau, and we now need to have more sustainable practices for fishing. And for that, definitely this kind of a control over quota, control over the carrying capacity, number of vessels should actually come. And the Kerala government has now, for the first time in India, has now imposed a regulation in the size of the fishes to be caught. This is called minimum legal size. For majority of the commercially valuable species, we have declared actually a minimum legal size. That means you cannot catch the young fishes. You can catch them only when up to a particular size, and this is called minimum legal size. So these kind of the control measures are there in India. But probably when you practice this sustainability for a longer period of time, we need to have some kind of a control over the fishing vessels, as well as the quota which is there for fishing. And that will come probably in future. At present, the control primarily restrict with the restriction in the mesh size regulation, and also the quota regulation, and also the fishing regulation.
Okay, excellent. I think that gives, answer about that. We'll come back to Ambali's next question afterwards. Prasoon asks, how does studying the migrating pattern of aquatic life help in understanding aquatic biodiversity?
Well,
Perhaps,
yeah,
as we move
because
around.
this is something interesting, because primarily because we know about these larger animals in the marine ecosystem, primarily because they are the top predators. Just like why you do a study on the tiger, why do you invest so much money in tiger conservation? Just like that, that the sharks and mega the mammals in the ocean, they are in the topmost part of the food chain, and they are the top predators in many of the instances, and they are the keystone species as well. In some cases they may serve as an umbrella species as well. So documenting them, understanding their migration is very important, because these are transoceanic migratory animals. So conserving them in Indian Ocean alone or in the coastal waters of India alone will not serve the purpose. So for example, there is an Indian Ocean Tuna Commission which actually look at the migratory pattern of tuna in different countries, maritime countries across the world. So these are migratory stocks, and understanding their migratory pattern is so important in understanding how do they migrate, why do they migrate, and what is their food material, and what are the climatic factors that drive their migration, etc., etc. This kind of understanding will actually substantiate and provide the data for future conservation management practices. I hope that answered the
Yeah,
query.
so there are, I think that, help to understand how we can track biodiversity also that way, right? As they move from one place to another. The next question is from Arpita, who asks about the technological advancements. So the question is, do technological advancements in ocean research, do they have any negative effects on the ocean as well?
Well, definitely. The, just like that other technologies as well, right from the chemistry with which we have fabricated a DDT molecule, to the technology with which we have discovered a nuclear bomb. And similarly, the technologies will sometimes may badly affect. That's the reason why for any technology, the technology is good if you use it properly. For example, the bigger question, for example, if you use an acoustic sound recorder to document the animal, fine, this is not an issue. If you use DNA barcoding to document a marine animal, fine, that is not going to harm anything. But at the same time, some other technologies, for example, technology for deep sea mining, we know the issues of the mining which is happening in the land and their ecological issues, cascading impacts, etc. But we don't know anything about the ecological impact and the cascading impact when we start deep sea mining. And deep sea is a very complex scenario for which we have little information on the ecology per se. But when you start mining the ocean, how will the nutrient flow gets impacted? How the ocean mining the deep ocean will ultimately change the bottom structure as well as benthic ecology? We don't know. And that is the reason why there are stronger groups internationally, including the group of scientists, who now argue that there should be an environmental impact assessment program before you start mining the ocean. And that there comes the issue of sustainability. We need to definitely address the question of sustainability. Ocean definitely is a larger source because we have no other sources left. So we need to extract the resources, but only with a caution, only with a proper study. So there are technologies which impact ocean, and there are technologies, land-based technologies, also impacting ocean. For example, a major part of the nuclear waste are dumped into the ocean. Maybe it is in the form of a larger protected ball with a very strong covering, but we don't know what will be the ultimate source of that, and what will be the ultimate impact when it is spoiled, and things like that. So the technology definitely will have its own implication. Otherwise, we have to use it sustainably.
Okay. I think that gives us a balanced view of the scenario. Thank you. And there's a question from Rohini about marine bacteria. So, some marine bacteria can degrade polythene. So, is there any chance to get, I guess, to study more about them and develop technology based on that? I think is
Yes,
the
yes,
question.
yes. That is, of course, that is a another field of research where quite a lot of people, including in India, are working on the plastic digesting bacteria, or they are plenty in the marine systems, and including in our lab, few people have isolated this bacteria which can uh, manage this polythene materials. But that too, the answer again is similar to the answer which I have given to the earlier question. How much will be the practical utility? And definitely it helps. It depends upon identifying a molecule which is highly effective in dealing with the plastic molecules and plastic digestion. And of course, plastic digestion bacteria are there in ocean, plenty of them. And definitely we need to concentrate our research to find out their diversity, and then the uses in the laboratory and later in an industrial scale as well.
Okay, so coming to our next question, Ambali had asked about the 1988 event where there was a single kind of set of, or I mean, so there was it's a special event, right? So millions of dollars and efforts from many countries were used to help three gray whales which were trapped in Alaska. So I think uh, Ambali is asking, about these kind of single events, and can conservation be maybe just geared towards one incident kind of?
Yep. See, the whale population or the marine mammal population, the definitely it's a priority research in globally, primarily because the animals are equivalent to the mega carnivores in the forest. And the research priority basically depends upon many multiple factors. And largest number of strandings actually, and death in ocean happens primarily because of two factors. One is actually the fishing operations, and second is actually the underwater research with regard to the defense. And these kind of since many of these marine mammals, they locate their way, find out their route by echolocation, and this kind of exercises, including the underwater explosions, they totally disorient these organisms, and then they get trapped. They get trapped. And the success in which the stranded organism and live stranded organisms are actually put into the open water is very expensive, and there are only limited number of success with regard to these kind of experiments. So what we can do as a management measure is definitely allow not to happen, these things to happen. And then that means many of the military operations finally drive these organisms clueless, and they get stranded in many part of the world. That is happening, and that is happening. And then you ultimately, even with the money, you cannot actually spending a lot of money in a particular species or escape, escaping a group of whales. It's expensive, but that same money can be used for other purposes also. This is another argument. And but considering the way in which the marine mammals are depleting in the oceans, and at least saving some of them will ultimately help in saving the ocean.
Okay, thank you. And I think I'll just end on one last question which had come in earlier. So, as you know, you mentioned a lot of ways that people can try to, take initiative with conservation and with cleanups and that kind of activity. So, someone had asked, how can you reduce the plastic pollution that's going into the ocean, for instance, at an individual level, and perhaps also, spreading awareness about it? Because I mean, while people are aware, they might not know exactly some of the ways that the plastic is getting into the ocean, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. See
do you have
what we,
suggestions?
yeah, yeah. With regard to the management of the plastics, major contributor is actually the land-based activities, and did not generate that much of oceanic activities, did not generate that much of amount of marine debris. So we are the contributors, and upstream management is one of the things. Prevent the plastic not from entering into the ocean, and managing it in the land itself through decentralized management practices. One option. And second is actually we need to the government is also now planning to work on the polluter pay principle. And there are large number of studies across the world which clearly shows that the multinational companies are the major contributors of the plastic pollution in the oceans. Some of the companies like Coca-Cola, they are the major contributors. So now the many of them are now collecting the materials back as part of their corporate social responsibility. They are doing it. So this kind of an involvement from the companies also will help in ultimately reducing the plastic input into the oceans. And once the plastics is already there in the ocean, it's very difficult to manage. And for example, the government of Kerala has now given launched a new program called Shujitwa Sagaram, and which means a clean sea program, where they are actually approaching the fishermen, going in the trawlers, whatever they get the plastic material, bring it back to the land, and then that is used by the women self-help groups, clean it, and then make it for some purposes, including for making roads. But that's not an ultimate solution. But ultimate solution comes when you start managing the things, the marine debris, right in the land itself. And then companies made responsible for that, some kind of the polluter pay principle, etc., involved. And this kind of upstream and downstream management will ultimately help in reducing the impact of marine debris in the oceans.
Yeah, I think this inspired one more question, because someone was asking about the sewer outfalls into the ocean. That's from YouTube. Sunita asked, what are the impacts
Uh,
of sewage outfalls on coastal waters?
uh, multiple, just like as you can imagine, only major industries, major sewage treatment plants across the world, they're all on the coastal sides, because the ocean is a dump house for these materials. One is again the upstream management, where you can manage it and leave it in the ocean, because ocean has its own self purification capacity depending upon the health of the ocean, the resilient power of the system there. But unfortunately, that's not happening. One, our treatment in the land-based treatment system is not paka. And second is that it does carry a lot of pathogenic microbes. And some of the microbes are even detected from the sensitive organisms like corals, including in India. And in Europe, there is a report that some of the human pathogenic bacteria may even cause disease in marine organisms like corals. So this is a serious issue. And second is the amount of hormones that we actually pump into the ocean every year. especially the estrogens and other hormones which are there in the sewer systems, and that may destabilize the hormonal makeup of the organism, marine organisms, particularly vertebrates. And large number of studies are there in that aspect as well. So we need to better understand the scenario in India. Except for some microbial the presence of some microbes in the marine organism, we don't have that much of an in-depth study in understanding all the chemical molecules ultimately reach these organisms from land-based activities. We need to do a lot of work on that as well.
Okay. So I think we are done with our questions, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for, all the different aspects you brought to light about oceans, and our deep dependence on them. And
And probably
I'd
each
also
one of
like
these
to,
aspects may require further discussion,
yeah,
because the topic
definitely.
is as large as an ocean itself. That's why.
Yes, of course. And as you mentioned, it's still so unexplored. So anybody here, or younger students who are interested, please do probably reach out to Professor Biju, or even check out the platforms he's mentioned, and have a look at those topics. And also thank you again to Professor Saudamni, who initiated the series. And I'd just like to mention that in February we have an outside in session. It's not going to be on a Sunday. It will be on Feb 9th, and we will share details with everybody in the future. But please do stay tuned and join us if you're able to. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Professor Biju. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you.